Hey Stampers, Kim from stampingandperfection.com. Welcome to my craft room. So today I wanted to create a card with a technique I have not yet tried and with a new stamp that I wanted to share. This is a stamp from a company called Concord and Ninth, and it's one of their Turnabout stamps, and it's one of the things that I absolutely love about Concord and Ninth is their Turnabout stamps. So I wanted to show you one of those. And I'm going to do this technique. This is going to be a watercolor. It's a watercolor lifting technique. I'm using my Arches watercolor paper. It is actually a cold press 140-pound paper. I've just taken, this is a 9 by 12 inch pad. It was on sale at one of the craft stores, and I just cut this into pieces, and I ended up with 3 4 by 5 1/4 inch pieces, and then 3 smaller squares, which I'm going to save for a project for later. Okay, so I like this watercolor paper, and it was a good price, so that's been working out for me. I'd like to try 2 different cards today, and with one of the cards I'm going to use, I want to create like an ombre effect, so I'm going to use a set of Altenew inks, and I think these are called Seashore. This is the Seashore collection. I love these colors. There's an emerald, a lagoon, a mountain mist, and a volcano lake. And you can see that they are different shades of the same basic color tone. And this is one of the things I think Altenew does really well with their inks. You can buy them in sets of 4 like this. And because Altenew carries a lot of beautiful multi-step stamps, and a lot of times you want like 3 or 4 different colors to layer together, so they sell them in sets of 4 that just beautifully layer together, and I'm using this set down here today. So it's probably one of my 2 favorite color sets. Just super fun. Then the other thing I want to do, I've been playing around a lot with these distress markers. These were great for watercoloring techniques, so I decided I would do a rainbow one because it's summer and I don't know why, I'm just super in the mood for rainbows. I'm also going to use, for the watercoloring techniques, I've got my jar of water. I don't have a sink my craft room's in the basement, and I don't have a sink down here yet, so I always have jars of water around. And then I have this, I love this brush. This is a Craftsmart brush. Again, I'm pretty sure I got this in a set at Michael's. This is a 3/4 inch flat brush. I really like this brush for the technique I'm going to use it for today. I'm going to use my Nuvo Clear Mark embossing pad, and then I've got white embossing powder that I will use. So to start out with, though, I need to actually create a couple of colored backgrounds. So I'm going to start with the rainbow one, and I'm basically going to just take my markers, and I'm just going to put my markers on, and I'm not trying to cover the whole page. Red, orange. I'm just sort of, you know, scribbling them on, and I'm using the brush end, and I'm using the side of the brush end because I don't want to damage the tip of the brush end. These markers I can use directly on a stamp. So I just want to be careful not to damage the tip. They have a lot of different uses, and I've just started exploring what I can do with them. I've been experimenting with different techniques to see what I can do with them. So I'm using watercolor paper, and these are the distress markers. So like you can find these all over the place. I got mine at scrapbook.com, but there are lots of places that sell them. Okay, so that's one I'm going to start with. Then the second one I'm going to start with, this will be a different technique. So I'm just going to take my Altenew ink pads, and I have my craft mat here. So I'm just going to spread a little bit of each of these colors. onto the craft mat. I'm going to try not to like mix them together because I do want to create an ombre effect. I just cut my fingernails off, so I have a terrible time opening my ink pads. We'll use the other side of that. And I am going to get a just wipe that out before I either get it all over my arm or my hands. If you're left-handed, you know that's sort of the bane of our existence when we get things on our left hand and then we try to do a project. Okay, so I'm just spreading these out a little bit, just smushing them onto my craft mat out of my work area. And I just need a little bit because I'm just doing one. And I have a spray bottle of water. This happens to be the Tim Holtz Distress Sprayer, which I like quite a bit. And I'm just going to spritz each of these. And I spritz them until the water kind of bubbles up. Okay, so the more water you put on, the more watery they're going to be. It doesn't really make any difference. So I'm going to flip this over. And on this one, I'm going to start with, actually, I'm going to do a wet on wet. So I'm just going to take this. This is why I like this big paintbrush, because I can really wet this down. And you can wet both sides. Wetting both sides actually keeps it from curling quite as much. Sometimes I tape it down to a cutting board. I have a cutting board that I use. I'm going to start with the lightest color, and I'm going to put that toward the bottom. I might need more of this color. This is super light. I didn't put much of this on. I use these colors a lot, so this one might be drying up a little bit. I think this one might need to be re-inked. It is a super soft color, so I'm just going to mix this in with my water. I'm just using the same brush. I'm going to wash off this brush and use it for other things, use it for other projects. So aren't these colors gorgeous? They're just so pretty. I'm just picking up a little of that color and kind of spreading it around. I'm going to wash off my brush a little bit and just take off some of the excess water onto a dollar store. I got a set of like 20 of these years ago, and they work so beautifully. Okay, I just want a little bit more of this light color. It's super light. I want to kind of try to blend them together a little bit. It's not going to matter because the technique that I'm doing is actually going to lift off some of the colors, so if they're not like blending perfectly together, it isn't going to make any difference with this technique. I'm going to stamp over it. Okay, now I'm going to put that aside to let it dry. Just going to put it on another craft mat. Try not to let it touch anything. And then I'm just going to take my baby wipe and clean this off. I want to, these distress markers react beautifully with water, so I'm going to take this same marker and I'm just going to start adding the water, kind of spreading this out a little bit. Just want to soften those lines. Kind of blend the colors together in the middle. And I'm just going to keep going over this till I have it looking the way I like it. I'm going to let this sit aside and dry. So I'm going to give these two backgrounds a chance to dry, and then I'm going to do my stamping. And I'm just going to squish my brush around in my water over here until it looks pretty clean. And I don't use soap or anything. Like if I'm using acrylic paints or oil paints, like oil paints I'll buy special cleaning solution, but my acrylic paints I just use Dawn dish soap. I put a little bit in my hand and just go back and forth and then rinse it. I do it under the sink. But with the watercolors they clean up pretty nicely, and I just kind of take my fingers and kind of put the brush back into the shape that I want it in. And then I have a metal container that I got on clearance at Michael's to hold all my brushes, and I store them standing up. And very handy next to me. Now I'm not going to put this water away. Probably shouldn't have put the brush away because I'll be coming back in with the brush. But I'm going to let those two backgrounds dry while we and I can already tell you I am loving, by the way, this Altenew one. Let me put this here. How pretty is that? Like, that is so pretty. I feel like the color's getting washed out in the camera, but wowee. I just love that set of ink pads. Alright, now let's talk about these turnaround stamps. The other thing I need besides the turnabout stamps, if I'm going to use the turnabout stamps, whenever I use a turnabout stamps, I need my stamp positioner. I happen to love the Misty. I've had it for a while, so I've gotten used to using it, and so it happens to be the one that I just have. You can use any stamp positioner you want. I don't think it matters, like different stamp positioners have different features, and I don't think it really matters which one you use. You just need to like the one that you're using. And I did purchase a couple of I like these bar magnets a lot when I need to use a magnet, so I purchased a couple of those because they came separately. Now with the Concord and 9th Turnabout stamps, on the back you get this little template, and I've done a couple of things. I have taken some really, this came like on the back of a cardstock or one of the paper pads. It's just the thick background, and it's like chipboard strength. So I just cut it down 6 by 6 with my big guillotine cutter, and then I just drew using a ruler. I just drew X's so that I could find the center point. And I did that with two. You can see this one's been used quite a bit. So I have two of these, and I will use my Altenew has this, they call it permanent adhesive, but it's got like dots of glue, and you can put a little bit on the back and it will temporarily hold something in place, so it works perfectly for this kind of thing. So you want something that will temporarily hold it down. But the other thing that they have you do, since I now have my template with the center point here, I need to mark on my stamp. So I'm going to remove the piece on my stamp, and you'll notice as I'm removing this, I'm pulling away what looked like were some of the stamp pieces here. This is a pretty cool background stamp because it gives you some options of things to stamp around. Now it looks like a pretty incomplete little background stamp, but actually this is pretty cool because I can turn it. I can stamp this once and leave it like that, and then I can turn it and use the same color. I can do the second generation stamping. I can use a different color. I can use different shades of colors, then stamp it with that, do the same thing, and if you turn it 90 degrees 4 times, you get this pretty amazing image. So I'm thinking I want to do it, like I'm looking at, they have on the back of this samples, I don't want, for this technique I'm using, I don't want to cover the whole background. I want some white space showing, so I think I'm only going to do this 2 times, but I will do some color ones eventually 3 times. Before I use this stamp though, I need to mark the center point of this stamp. And they've got this little template on the back, and they tell you to put down the stamp. Here we go. I'm just going to line up the 3 images that actually line up there. And then I always have nice Sharpie permanent markers on my desk. I want to line this up, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but I want to line it up as best I can. So I'm lining it up, I'm lining these 3 up with this template, and I'm going to put a big dot, and this is on the back of the stamp, and put it there. So in a couple of the stamps I've actually taken a ruler and marked that line down too with my Sharpie, because sometimes I find that I line it up better when I have a little bit more than just a dot. So I'm going to put this along there also. Right. And then I'm done with that template. I just want to give this a chance to dry before I stick it on. So another thing, the next thing that I do is I'm going to take this template that I created and I tuck this right into the corner. And one of the reasons I have to use my larger MISTI, because I usually use my mini MISTI for all my stamping needs, is that this is a 6x6 inch background stamp. So I need the larger space, so you need at least a 6x6. So your mini MISTI won't work with this particular Turnabout stamp. And by the way, this one is the Dottie Turnabout stamp. I just love this. Could not resist purchasing this. Alright, so I've got this lined up, I've got my template down, I've got this lined up, and I'm just going to put that down like that. So now my stamp is in position. Okay, so the next part I'm going to do is I want to actually heat emboss the image of my stamp onto my cardstock. Now when you do this, you want to make certain that, since I'm going to do some heat embossing, you want to make certain that your background that you've created is very dry, because the water will actually stick to the embossing powder. So you want this to be dry. You want to be certain about that. So this is the one I created with my Altenew inks, and I already have this set up, so I have my template in place, I have my stamp in place, and I'm going to add some temporary adhesive to the back of this card. And I'm going to center this the best I can. It doesn't have to be perfect because I'm putting it on the template and it's going to stay on the template while I do my stamping. Now one thing I do want to say is for this technique I actually need to use clear embossing powder. I believe I said white before because I had the white sitting next to me. So I want to make sure I'm going to use clear embossing powder for this. And so I'm going to take my one of my embossing pads. I have the Clear Mark and I have the Versamark. My Versamark is the goopiest, so I'm going to use that one because everything is drying out really fast in the basement with the dehumidifier on. So I want the goopiest pad that I have, and it happens to be my newest Versamark. So I'm going to ink this up, and I'm actually going to ink it up a couple of times because it's watercolor paper and it's got a texture to it. So I'm going to give it a good press, and then I'm going to just pull this up and I can see it, but not as well as I would like to. So then I'm going to ink it up again, and since it's on the template, my template's squarely in the corner, I'm going to put this back down and then give it another good push. Then I'm going to take this and I'm going to turn it. Now ordinarily I would do the embossing powder next, but I don't want to take this off the template because then I would have to reline it up. So I'm going to I turned it 90 degrees and I'm going to ink it up and stamp again. And those dots are now going to stamp in a different place. Now the cool thing about the dot ones is that some of them are supposed to overlap, which I find really fun. So we'll see how this comes out. Okay, I'm going to stand up again and give this a good push. Okay, I'll just take this off and try not to touch the top of my card. And I keep my embossing powder in a big bin, so I can just do big pieces like this. This just works well for me. I bought a bunch of embossing powder when it was on sale so I could pour a lot of it in at once. So just FYI, it took a lot of embossing powder to get that much in a container, but it works really well. Alright, now I'm going to heat up my gun a little bit and emboss from behind. I'm going to take a couple of paper towels, and I have my water, oops, not that one, that one's pretty empty. I have my water spritzer, which is getting pretty empty, and I'm going to take some clean water, and I've got the brush I was using before, and that embossing, ooh, maybe I'll use the clean water. Holy cow. There we go. Now the embossing, the areas where I embossed will resist the technique I'm about to do. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover this with water, and since this is watercolor or water reactive ink, it will react with the water. So I can just wet this down, and then it actually gets lighter in the spaces around where I embossed, because basically the paint is starting to react with the water again, and if I just start blotting, you can see that it's removing the water. This is a super fun technique. Now you'll notice I got a little smudge of orange paint over there. I'm not worried about that because it's watercolor, or it's actually orange marker, and it's watercolor. It's going to come off, and I'm going to do this a little bit more. I'm not going to get a completely white background, but I want the space between the dots to be lighter than the dots themselves. Like, I really like the way this bottom part is looking. And you can keep, adding more water and taking water off, and blotting it off until you get the colors that you want. And you see how that's coming off the paper around the embossed dots, and it's giving an ombre effect. I feel like the light is washing it out a little bit, but like in person it really has a nice color. So I'm going to do a little more up here at the top, lighten up that corner. And one of the things, I definitely realized that I need to be careful, because I cut my paper exactly the size of the card front, that I wanted. So, oops. So you want to make sure you get the edges there. You can trim off the edges. Like this piece I think may be a tiny bit wider, so I could trim off the edges widthwise. You can always trim a piece down and put it mat it almost every day. Okay, so that's done. I'm going to put this aside to dry out, and then I'm going to put this on a card. I really like the way this came out. And I also did this with white dots, and I did not blot the background, because if I blot the background, then all the color is going to go away. But I actually absolutely love the watercolor with the white dots, and this is pretty fun too, because now I have these dots with darker spots of color, and they're shiny because I've used clear embossing pattern. I'm going to do the same thing with this one and see how this comes out. I'm going to see how this works with these markers. So I'm going to re-wet this to reactivate the inks. And I don't know what I'm expecting here, because I had a lot of trouble getting those lines out with those inks. So I don't know if this will be these will be oh, they are fading. Oh, look at that. I was about to say, I don't know if this will be my go-to ink for this technique. Oh, but it's working. Look at that. Can you see the difference? Those dots really pop because the embossed areas are resisting the water, so they're holding on to the original ink that I had in there. And I'm just going to keep doing this. Try to get those edges. Water added to those. Actually, I really like this one. I was a little hesitant when I was doing the adding the water to the background, because I wasn't able to get rid of these lines, but I actually really like the effect of the lines now. It's kind of gives you a whole different, it gives you some amount of texture to that. Alright, so those are my two backgrounds. Actually, I have three, because I had 3 card backs. I wanted to try one with the white also. I just love these Altenew inks in this color family, which I think is Seashore, but it's like Morning Mist, Lagoon, Emerald, and Volcano Lake, which is my favorite of the 4. So I'm going to let these dry, and then I'm going to make my cards out of them. So now I'm putting the cards together, and I've put 2 of them together. I just took this one and added a really pretty script die cut that I popped up on some foam, craft foam, and I also added a white heat embossed sentiment. Now these came also from Concord and 9th. The Be Your Own Kind Of came from the Beautiful Words stamp set, and I just love this stamp set. It's just got wonderful sentiments in it. It's also got a beautiful U and a heart die cut that go with it, which I didn't use. I really liked the Lovely. That's also another Concord and 9th, and it came in a set of 3, and I'm pretty sure this says Incredible, Wonderful, and Lovely, so I had those 3. I really wanted to try that. And what I do with my script die cuts like this, I like to give them a little dimension. I don't know if you can see that. You can, if I turn it sideways, you can see the card has some dimension. And when I cut these out, I cut out the script word, and then I cut it out a second time in foam. I know a lot of people will cut out the word 5 or 6 times and then stack all those layers together. I don't have enough patience for that. So what I do is, and I've gotten in the habit of doing this, I have some double-sided adhesive sheets from Sizzix. They look like this in the package, and the paper just peels off. I put it on the back of my cardstock, and then I run it through the my Big Shot. And I do the same thing with this craft foam. You can get these big sheets of craft foam for not very much at the craft store, or you can get them in bulk on Amazon, like crazy bulk. I put the double-sided sticky Sizzix sheet on the back of that also, and then instead of having to do this 5 or 6 times, I only have to do this once. And usually I do white on white, but this time I wanted my sentiment black. And to be honest, I never quite line them up correctly, but I don't actually mind the effect I get by not lining them up correctly, so I'm just gonna put these together. Like, this is the thing the kind of thing I have the least patience for. I feel like I'm all thumbs, all chubby thumbs at that, but because I have that adhesive and I removed the backing, I peeled the backing off, it's going to stick. I don't have to try to dab glue onto some little skinny thing, and it works beautifully. Then when I go to attach it to the card, like this one, I can just take the backing now off the foam, craft foam, and just stick it on. And let me make sure I get this sort of straight. I don't push anything down till I get it the way I want it. There you go. And I'll put this one down. I really like this double-sided adhesive, and I'm going to be honest, for a long time I forgot to use it. So what I did was I started keeping those sheets over next to my Big Shot, so whenever it was time to cut out something like this, and I use it for all kinds of die cuts, but especially the ones that have the skinny little pieces that I'm going to have to put skinny little glue on. I don't like doing that. So I now keep these sheets next to my Big Shot. I have some on my craft table in a folder, and I have some on next to my Big Shot. Now, here's the second one. This one I just put the thank you on. I put on both of these, I put some sequins just to top it off. This one I added a little black mat to, and they're both mounted on a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch card base. Actually, it's 4 1/4 by 11. I scored it at 5 1/2. And this one doesn't have the black mat, so you can see one difference there, and the other difference there, the backgrounds are both done the same way. This one used the clear embossing powder, this one used the white embossing powder, and this one I did the, I removed some of the background color. This one I didn't do that. I just love this set of inks from Altenew, and so I just kept the color the way it was and experimented a little bit. Now, this stamp set that I use, this Turnabout stamp set, comes with a few extra stamps here. I haven't put the larger stamp back, but I could take some of these stamps and stamp over these dots in different patterns. I've got some, background, so I could make a few of them or all of them even more interesting if I wanted to by doing that. Like, I just am scratching the surface with this, and I only turned this twice. Remember, I could do this in colors, ink colors, and do a different color or a different set of colors. The possibilities are endless with these Turnabout stamps, and they are so pretty. I only turned it twice. Turning it 4 times would fill the whole thing, so it's really pretty. So there are just 2 ways you can finish it off. A third way, this one was, I don't know, I must have misjudged cutting this one. So again, what I did was I took a piece of this craft foam, cut it down to fit the back of my card. I have this double-sided sticky tape, which I put on the back. Then I attached I put some of that double-sided sticky tape on the back of the card piece that I made, and I'm using this because it really curled a lot when I watercolored. I used quite a bit of water for this project, so it curled a lot and I wanted to uncurl it. And this foam stuff works great. So I've got the same 4 1/4 by 11 scored at 5 1/2, but this didn't quite take up the whole thing, and I didn't want to put a whole black mat on, so I just cut a black cardstock strip and just placed it so a little bit of it will show along the side. I really like that kind of card layout. So now I'm just going to remove the double-sided sticky tape. I really thought that the colorful with the clear turned out pretty cool. What I'd like to do is, this is with the distress markers. Where did I put, oh, I'm taking it off here. Duh. But this is with the distress markers, and I sort of wish I'd picked a brighter blue and a brighter purple. I'd like to try that also with just some of my ink pads and see, you know, what other kinds of effects I can get by doing this. And I'm excited to experiment with this technique. It's actually the first time that I've tried it, and I'm super excited about how it turned out. When I saw it demonstrated, the person was not using background stamps, she was using stencils. She actually put a stencil down after she did the coloring with the markers and let her background dry. She actually, let me concentrate here for a minute. She actually then took a background, or a stencil instead of a background stamp like I did, put the stencil down, taped it in place, and then used her Versamark pad over it, lifted the stencil, put the powder on, and heat embossed. So it's another way to make your stencils go just a little bit farther. Now this is a little bit longer than I want, so I'm just going to trim it off. And I'm going to slide my scissors along the edge of the top mat that I created there, so I get as straight an edge as possible. And there you go. That completes my card. And I could add some sequins like I did with these other cards just to make it interesting. But 3 different cards doing sort of the same thing. So these two were created with that watercolor lifting technique. This one was just created with ink blending and the Turnabout stamp. But it all started, everything that you see here as far as die cuts and stamp sets, all came from Concord and Ninth. The ink colors came from Altenew, and these are the Ranger, Tim Holtz Ranger Distress markers. So there you go. Check out these Turnabout stamps. They're super fun to use. And by the way, the thank you, I forgot to say this, is also a Concord and Ninth. It was actually a free gift I got for ordering a certain amount. It was like $60, and they sent me this, was free, and that foam tape makes it kind of fun, and you can kind of see I have a little white shadow effect, which I could actually make more pronounced if I wanted to. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it inspires you to try some new watercoloring techniques, and try this with your stencils, try this with your background stamps, try this with any stamp that you have. You don't actually have to fill up the back, but it gives you some kind of cool effects. Try it with different kinds of inks that you have, see what works, see what doesn't, experiment a little bit, and have fun with it. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like below, and make sure you subscribe to my channel. And you can check out all my stuff and more details on my blog at stampingimperfection.com. Thank you so much for watching.